Can you see me? I'm standing pretty much where I was standing in the opening shot of the previous video, which follows. Though I have put the camera back slightly, so you get a full impression of just how tall and how much these nitens have grown in 2.5 years. This is the rock solid Viminalis mentioned in the following video. It's not hugely tall. Viminalis might do better inland. I think they're affected by the gales and the salt winds here closer to the coast. Certainly they always get burnt off. Anyways, it's very healthy, easily 20 centimetres at the base, 15 centimetres at breast height possibly, but a good chunky solid tree. It's certainly been interesting looking back through these old videos and re-uploading them, because the growth has just been phenomenal. In this area, I'd say the growth wasn't particularly strong until I started dosing, until I dosed once only the soil with milk kefir, and I know that seems probably really weird to many of you, but it really has worked. It's improved the soil in this area and the growth rate of the trees. Further to good soil conditions for growing trees, this eucalyptus, as I mentioned previously, I chucked it on the compost heap here because it was so weak and scruffy I wouldn't have had the cheek to sell it. And yet look at it now. In 2.5 years, 7 metres tall, so getting on for 3 metres growth per year. Very healthy. It's shrugged off the recent severe weather event, as I'm calling it, not just the cold frost, but also the freezing fog. I think was even more damaging than the cold temperatures. This is my compost heap, so I chuck all the kitchen scraps down here, and so it's getting a lot of high quality, nutrient rich soil to feed in, even though just remarkable growth in 2.5 years. I still come across people who are under the impression that eucalyptus are shallow rooted, and nothing could be further from the truth. I have had a few eucalyptus blow over here. Generally speaking, they've been poorly planted to start with. There have been some ferocious gales and one hurricane, official hurricane, during the past 3.5–4 years since I started growing eucalyptus here. Anyways, as you can see, all of these nitens are doing really well. Really pleased with all of them. So enjoy the comparison between what the trees are like now, the eucalyptus trees, and what they were like 2.5 years ago. Just phenomenal growth. Fantastic. It's the 1st of June and April and May have been particularly dry. It was windy. I think there was a storm in April, and certainly there was a severe gale in May. A warm wind, but nonetheless that's probably one of the big factors actually during May has been the wind, but not just the wind. It's been a very dry, warm wind, and so hydration has been a big issue for the eucalyptus. Nonetheless, there have been successes, and I've been making quite a few changes, and I have quite a few changes planned for the rest of this year. So I'll just give you a tour around what's been happening. I'm very pleased with the establishment of these Eucalyptus nitens in this area here. In the lower area, they were planted in July last year, and I'd say Eucalyptus nitens definitely need a year or so to get going fully, so I'd expect these to really start to enjoy themselves from now on. Further up this area, these are the three, maybe half a dozen here, 3 polypots and 3 plugs were planted October, maybe even as late as November last year, so they haven't been in the ground long. Probably September, October for some of these, and the nitens there, the tall ones, were planted from polypots, and that was in February last year, just before the frosts. Likewise the gunnii. So as you can see, I am starting a new vegetation control method. I'm packing the grass cuttings around the bases of the eucalyptus, and what I'm hoping this is going to achieve, or perhaps hoping for some, in a couple of instances hoping, and in other instances factually knowing. First of all, it is going to suppress vegetation, and secondly, it's going to dump nutrients as the grass cuttings rot down right around the bases of the trees. And thirdly, it has been particularly dry during this past couple of months, so it will help shade the ground and retain moisture. So if the ground isn't shaded, then it very quickly starts to dry and crack up. So you'll see here particularly, this was an area that was covered in black plastic polythene last year, and I had eucalyptus stored on it, polypots, and it is starting to crack up because there's no cover here and moisture evaporates from the surface easily. So the other couple of things that I'm just hoping it will do is, I watched a video recently on YouTube and a soil expert was suggesting that rotting vegetation absorbs nitrogen, and that might seem like a strange thing to do in terms of restricting nitrogen that could be available to the eucalyptus trees. However, another source that I read online was that eucalyptus trees which have a high nitrogen content are more susceptible to blue gum psyllid, and I am still having a little bit of an issue with that while I establish a predator balance, ladybirds and lacewings. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens. I'll keep you posted on that. While I'm down here, I have started preparing the ground for the next load of eucalyptus that I will be planting, and I intend to plant globulus next to the nitens, and then Johnstonii. Well, I haven't maybe not made up my mind completely. Maybe MacArthurui. I do have plans for a Johnstonii hedge, and I definitely will be planting some Johnstonii for trees. Anyway, I've started preparing the ground here for that, and I'll take it down as close as I can to the soil, and then, as I say, I'm going to use the grass cuttings as vegetation control. While I'm down here in this area, this is my organic dump, or used to be. So in this area I used to dump all the grass cuttings, kitchen waste, etc., old plants, and I also dump kind of eucalyptus polypot trees that I think aren't going to make it, or seedlings that I've plugged up and I don't think are going to make it. And the other day I was having a look, I thought, bloody hell, there's a eucalyptus growing out of the middle of it. So I think that's a globulus. It's certainly doing fine, it's thriving. Some of the leaves are a bit battered when I as I didn't notice it to start with, and I dumped the kitchen waste on top of it, so I'm being a bit more careful now. And that would be interesting actually, because this has been in the middle of rotting vegetation just in terms of the blue gum psyllid, and this doesn't actually appear to have any. One there, couple there. So perhaps either they just haven't got around to this area, or perhaps the rotting vegetation absorbing nitrogen does help. So I touched on Johnstonii. I have been creating, as I've been digging out the sods of turf from my shelter to form my sheltered area, I've been blocking them up into a double wall and filling the cavity with horse manure and rotting vegetation. So hopefully we'll get the Hugo culture effect of the rotting vegetation at the bottom, topsoil on the top. But for this stretch here, I'll be planting Johnstonii as a hedge. It's supposed to be very wind resilient and very tough. So that's what I'm doing in that area. And I'll just give you a look around the screened, wind sheltered area now. This is my wind screen, wind shielded area for nursery stock. And what I'm doing here is I am planting hedging all the way around, and I'll take the windscreen netting and fence posts away so that I have a closed in area protected by, for eucalyptus, protected by eucalyptus. If you can imagine in a proper forest, the younger trees are protected by their larger siblings. Wanted to touch on wind burn, particularly cold winds that affect eucalyptus. It tends to turn the foliage purple reds, and if you can imagine a deciduous tree that drops its leaves, it draws the chlorophyll back into its system to store it. It's an expensive resource to store it for the spring, and then it pushes it back out into the new growth. Eucalyptus are evergreen, so they don't drop their leaves quite as readily, though they will drop their leaves in severe wind burn, cold wind burn situations. But firstly, they'll withdraw the chlorophyll into their systems, and this turns the leaves reds and purples. And I have been asked about that a few times, and I have been observing it now for 3-4 years, and that is definitely the only explanation for it, is cold winds. So I'll just give you a walk around this area. Very pleased with the way this has turned out. You can see here the double wall, turf wall with horse manure in the middle, and these are Ernigera, and I'm really pleased with Ernigera. They have been turned back to, you can see the kind of reddy at the bottom, but they have turned back to the greeny bluish very quickly. And nice heart-shaped leaves, very pleased. So you can see these are pulverulenta, and you can see the purpley bits with the wind burn, but you can also see how quickly they've recovered in a couple of weeks, and putting out first of all green, and that'll turn to blue. Globulus the same. They should be blue, and they are turning blue, but they definitely went, as you can see, shades of red. And the Ernigera, I'm really looking forward to seeing how quickly they establish and grow. Glossensians, hope I pronounced that right, they seem to be particularly susceptible to hydration. So it has been very dry. I've been watering perhaps 3 times a day and at times, and Glossensians definitely dry out very quickly. You can see here a few with leaves that are a bit curled up and shriveled up with the dry winds. Gunnii are a bit more resilient and tougher. Pulverulenta aren't quite as hardy as other eucalyptus varieties, but they do have very attractive foliage and they are suitable for pruning, so I'm hoping to prune them into a hedge. This is a bit of a display area. As you can see, these are very quickly turning back to green now, and I expect them to be a lovely shade of blue very shortly. These are MacArthurui, and likewise get the ready from the cold winds in April and early May, but quickly turning green again. Johnstonii have been really tough. Johnstonii are definitely one of my picks for this year. I'm definitely going to be planting a lot of them, as I say, as a tough hedge windscreen along the edge of the driveway there. And I will definitely also be planting a few specimen trees. You have some huge trees here in Ireland, 40 metres plus. That's a big tree. These are parvifolia in this area, and the rabbits did nip off the tops of these. Not the rabbits, the hares. I don't have rabbits here, but they seem to be fine. The hares don't seem to be that interested. They're obviously not a favourite snack. These have beautiful little green leaves, and likewise I think they'll form a beautiful hedge, and they're very tough and hardy. We have had severe winds, 5 storms and a severe gale in the last 6 months, and the Viminalis have been burnt off at the tops where they're not so sheltered. I am expecting them to recover, but it would have been nice for them to have put on another metre already, but I reckon hopefully I'll get another metre out of them by the end of the growing season. Anyway, I am very pleased with the way this has turned out. If you look back through the blogs, there's no comparison with the way this aisle looks in comparison to what it used to look like. Some of these trees are 3 metres plus now for sure. Some of the Viminalis that were shorter and protected by the bank haven't been as impacted by windburn, and they are definitely putting out spurts of growth. Up here I have a Dulrii ampliana, a mountain gum, and likewise, as you can see there at the top, it's putting out fabulous new growth. Hasn't been affected by the windburn as severely. So yeah, I'm looking forward to a big tree from that very soon. I did stake some of these trees during the worst of the gales, though most of them have been surprisingly sturdy, and I'll want to touch on that. There is one that I have left staked. Hopefully I'll be able to take that off by the end of the year. It will be solid again, put down some stronger roots, especially during this dry period. I wanted to specifically touch on the staking of these trees, and it was only a few, and we have had some severe storms during the past 6 months, and quite a few of them were westerlies, quite a few of them others were northeasterlies, so they've been battered this way and the next. So one of the things that I come across is the misconception about eucalyptus and their root systems. So quite a lot of people say, oh, not planting eucalyptus, they're shallow rooted and they'll blow over in the wind. Okay, so none of these have actually blown over completely. Some of them got a bit unstable, but then others are rock solid. This one over here, hopefully you can just see me here. Yep. Okay, this is my tallest one, or it was my tallest one. It's never been staked. It's a rock solid. During Storm Hannah, Sitka spruce got blown over. None of my eucalyptus got blown over. A report in National Geographic states that eucalyptus can dig their roots down 40 metres in search of hydration. 40 metres is well over 120 feet, so I guess it depends on your definition of shallow rooted. What I'd say is I'm actually quite pleased about there being a little bit of a drought at the moment, because these will form stronger root structures. They'll put more of their energy into their root systems and they'll become more and more stable and secure. Even though these weren't probably, say they were 2.5, 3 metres, they have provided a great deal of protection, wind protection for my house, even at this height. They're probably maybe 6 metres high in relation to my actual house, but they've definitely made a big difference to the wind impact on the structure. So far from being wind intolerant, eucalyptus are very wind tolerant. Continuing on, this specimen here, I think it must be a globulus. It's done particularly well. It's getting to the point, Tasmanian blue gum. I'm pretty sure it is a Tasmanian blue gum. I think there were quite a number of rogue seeds in a batch of gunnii seeds, and some of them were blue gum. This particular one has definitely done really well. It's well over 2 metres, 2.5 metres now. Getting too tall for me to wash the psyllids off, but hopefully it will develop its adult foliage shortly and won't need any additional assistance. Maybe farm forestry are right and blue gum psyllid just aren't an issue. This one's certainly thriving. It was my intention to leave this area once they got established and just let them carry on, and I'm very pleased that that's what's happening. I have had losses in this area. I think now that I'm looking back, more down to light deficiency. So during the winter they get shaded from the bank. It's south facing in this direction. But those that have managed to put their head above the shading are now starting to establish well. Here's a nitens. This is actually quite a dry area, so I'm very pleased that's done so well. Very pleased with all of this, kind of hoping this will grow into the same avenue effect as up through the Viminalis. These are mostly gunnii and what I call the round leafed juveniles, so gunnii, orbifolia, Dalrai empliana. So yeah, really pleased. It's dry and compacted ground here, and so I'm particularly pleased with these specimens here, and I'm just going to touch on the dry compacted ground issue right now. This is my Eucalyptus gunnii hedge, wind shelter, screening, wind shelter and hedge. It's not screening. I don't mind seeing my polytunnels. It's actually quite a pleasant area here now. Anyway, what I wanted to touch on here was, if you're reading back through my blog on my website, Eucalyptus and Me, then I extolled the virtues of horse manure. I was ecstatic because these are, you know, they're 2 metres tall, the best of them at the moment, but I've already pruned them once by at least 1/2 metre. So this would have been at least another 1/2 metre taller. It's striking that these have come out with so much bushy, thick, lush growth so quickly. These were planted last May, June, maybe June, after Storm Hannah and after I terraced off this area and built a wall. As I say, read back through my blog for the details. So anyway, initially I had it in my head, hey, wow, horse manure is just such good fertiliser, the nutrients in it must be amazing. But there's several things that have gone on here to ensure that these eucalyptus have had such a good start. First of all, yeah, there will have been nutrients in the horse manure, which would have definitely helped. Secondly, though, it's hugelkultur, where the horse manure rots down, heats the soil and creates a good environment, nice warm moist environment for the roots. Horse manure retains moisture, so during a drought it doesn't just drain away, it retains the moisture where the roots need it. Another big factor is all the soil and horse manure here was fluffed up and aerated and broken up and loose, so it had been easy for the root systems to penetrate it and expand and grow. So bigger, stronger roots, bigger, stronger top growth, bigger, stronger top growth, bigger, stronger roots. It's a chain reaction. So definitely want to touch on that. It wasn't just the nutrients in the horse manure, it was several other factors as well. Still debating what I'm going to do. I do have plans to cut down this eucalyptus hedge to stimulate even bushier, thicker growth and keep it in check. I don't think I'm just going to prune it as a hedge. Certainly on this corner area here, there's not a lot of shelter, and they have taken a severe battering. This is northwest facing, and they have had, they've taken punishment. Even though they've taken punishment, they, as I say, strong, healthy root systems, strong, healthy trees, more wind resilient, and these are putting out new growth already. This one was scorched off and it's putting out significant new growth. One here blown over completely. It was particularly big. You can see the thickness of the stems, but I do want an upright, nice hedge along this area. The rest of them are all grand. So yeah, I'm still debating. I might leave those in this area, chop them down a little bit and make significant adjustments in this area here. Maybe replant with some plugs and keep them watered in and chop down the adults and see how we go, maybe to this point here. If you'd been watching along, then you'd have seen the milk experiment, and I have to say the milk experiment got out of hand and the grass was overwhelming everything. It was so lush and thick. So I'm employing the grass cutting vegetation control method, and I've stopped putting, it's mostly milk kefir, diluted milk kefir, but I've stopped putting it on this area. I am putting it on the Nitens plugs that I started this video off on, and I will continue to put it on all the other eucalyptus trees. While I'm here, all the losses or the significant failure rate or weak trees have been in this area here, that line there. And previously I had thought, well, I sprayed with D50 in this area, and then we had the beasts from the east, and then we had the drought, and probably the drought's the biggest factor, or one of the biggest factors. However, this area, I had initially thought that this area was the natural slope of the field, but it's not. The natural slope of the original field is the line up there with the Viminalis. So there's very little here in terms of topsoil, nutrients, and certainly any moisture just drains off, whether it's summer or winter. You can see how browned off it is now. So I discovered this very dramatically. I've started growing lavender, and a few strands to why I'm planting lavender. It'll attract ladybirds and lacewings, which will, their larvae will feast on the blue gum psyllid, so part of the predator balance. But anyway, when I was digging these in, it was just kind of so obvious there's nothing here. I did try wildflowers. I sowed lots of wildflowers seeds. Didn't work out. Birds ate them. There's nothing here, so as soon as the dry conditions came along, they died. Even if they had germinated, maybe next year I'll get some. Anyway, I'm leaving clusters of purple clover, and as I say, hopefully we'll get a predator balance. If you go to my website, boglizard.ie, and my blog, Eucalyptus and Me, and it's the August update, you'll see a photograph of me standing next to these Eucalyptus gunnii, and at the time they were about shoulder height, and they're starting to put on significant growth. The nitens as well was about waist height. All of these are putting on significant growth now. The growing season, it is definitely growing season here in Ireland now. Everything is starting to put on a spurt. I have quite a lot of projects that I have in mind for this year, so subscribe and get notified to be updated. Hope that helps. Meantime, good luck.